we'll
Can't
see
hurt.
how it goes.
Well, it looks like we're live, so
Looks like we're live. Hello, hello, hello.
Hello.
Welcome. How are we today? Dustin, how's it going?
going okay. Just like yesterday, still moving, still packing stuff
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
So yeah, it's going good. Tore the bed down yesterday, so I put a mattress on the floor, like 21-year-old guy again. So that was fun. But yeah, everything's going well. How about you, Kane? How's it going?
Very well. No, yeah, not too bad. Delighted to be joined by Rozzi Meredith of Voxly Digital. Rozzi, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Absolute pleasure. So how's your lockdown going, Rozzi?
Yeah, it's going okay. I feel like I haven't completed the lockdown bingo of becoming a yoga instructor and learning 8 languages, but I'm doing okay. Yeah, not going too stir crazy. Looking forward to some sunshine this weekend so I can actually leave the house though.
Yeah. I was just looking at your books at the back there. We were just saying beforehand that my kind of lockdown resolution was to read more books. I'm so far halfway through one after 6 months, and I haven't picked it up for about 3 weeks. So it's not been going too great.
The internet is full of information, Kane. You start somewhere.
That's what it is. I'm consuming the internet every day, so there you go. Any of your lockdown resolutions, Dustin?
I don't think I really had any. I wanted to. This has been a resolution for a couple years now. I wanted to learn how to tie some knots. So I actually did, because I also was like, I need to work out. So I created sort of like a semi like prison workout where I took some milk bottles and like filled them up with water and tied a rope around it so like I could lift it up. So that was about the closest I ever got to that.
Amazing. Innovation. Yeah. I love it.
That's class. I also took up running.
Oh,
don't know whether I told you that. Yeah. So about 4 weeks ago, I went for a run on Monday, Tuesday, and a Wednesday, and I haven't been since.
Did you do the couch to 5K? That's what I tried, and I made it to week 4.
Did you? So did you get to 5K?
No, there's 9 weeks in the program.
9 weeks. Well, that's better than me. I did 3 weeks running. I think that's pretty much it. So yeah, looks like we've got some people joining us. Stefan Massey is joining us. Hello, Stefan. James Paul has joined as well. Afternoon, James. How do? Yeah, so here we go. So I think what we're going to do today, Rozzi, Voxly have published some interesting studies over the last couple of weeks. Well, I say probably about 4 weeks, maybe something like that. And we're going to get into that. I've been referencing them in talks and in presentations and everything. So they've been they've been really valuable to me. So we're going to get into that. But first of all, Rozzi, do you want to kind of introduce yourself and give us a little bit of an overview of what your role is as head of innovation strategy at Voxly, and a little bit about Voxly as well?
Yeah, of course, no problem. So hello, everyone. My name is Rozzi. As Kane said, I'm the head of innovation strategy at Voxly Digital. So basically my role is to guide the strategic development of the projects that we build for our clients. And bit about Voxly. So we are Europe's leading voice tech agency. So we basically help brands navigate the voice first world primarily by building voice apps on Amazon Alexa and Google Assistant. We've been around for about 3 years now, which is bizarrely old in voice world. But we've been really lucky enough to work with a lot of really big global brands. So we support things like Recipedia for Unilever. We've worked a lot with Diageo, Maybelline, Match Today, GSK, big household names, which has been great fun. And we're sort of end-to-end voice development agency. So we work across kind of the strategy, which is the think, the build, and then the kind of in-life support, the run at the end. So we've got normally I'd say an in-house team of experts, but now a isolated
an at-home team of experts.
Yeah, exactly. Stationed not in Paddington, but our kitchen tables, across sort of strategy, UX development, and then kind of coding development. So we're about 10 right now, and looking to keep growing.
Cool. And head of innovation strategy, is that head of innovation strategy for Voxly, as in your head of Voxly Digital's innovation strategy, or your head of innovation strategy for Voxly clients, as in you lead the innovation strategy for the clients? Is it on behalf of Voxly going to market, or is it on behalf of the clients?
Good question. Both, I suppose. I will typically come and work with clients at the kind of upfront think product development stage. Things like doing this research and being able to draw on some really good insights to actually guide voice app proposition development is and kind of competitor reviews and insights and bringing in creative concepts is a lot of what I do, but also kind of being the whole team is it's such an emerging area. The whole team is very kind of future facing and making sure that we're innovating and currently always looking at new features and things like that, but I suppose also part of my role is to kind of spearhead that internally as well.
Cool. So we're used to seeing studies from like eMarketer and VoiceBot and things like that, and it's kind of a little bit unusual for a voice specialist agency to be conducting that kind of research. So do you want to give us a little bit of we'll get into the research and into the findings, but do you want to give us a bit of an overview of where it came from? Like where did it come from? Why did you do it?
Yeah, of course. Well, I think, like I said, we sort of work across the whole end-to-end process. So especially over the last year or so, we've been trying to develop our strategic offering in that think stage. And what we were finding is that although we're very kind of evidence and analytics driven when it comes to once we've launched a voice app and we tag it all up with Google Analytics and we optimize it based on evidence, we were finding that a lot of the time that upfront proposition development, we were relying on evidence, like you mentioned, Kane, like from VoiceBot, which and Brett and the team there do a brilliant job, but understandably, it's quite US focused, a lot of the insights. So we wanted to really kind of do our own research really and hear from UK specific voice owners. And then the other thing we saw a bit of a shift, and this is, we'll come on to it, but why we launched specifically one of the surveys is so we launched two surveys, one about families and one about the impact of coronavirus more generally on voice assistant usage. And we started looking at the family one because we recently launched a voice app called Match the Day magazine, which has done really well. It's kind of a footy trivia game skill.
Good example of APL going on in there as well.
Yes,
thank
you. Yeah, that was a really fun one actually, and there's lots of great kind of recorded audio, and Paz and Ketch, the guys who do it, have kind of this lovely back and forth. So it was really good, and we launched it, and the popularity was massive really quickly, and it got us thinking, like, okay, what are the use cases specifically with families that we have tapped into there, and what are the kind of consumption behaviors? So we wanted to look at families, and then of course as soon as lockdown happened, we understandably, I think, and not surprisingly, saw this massive spike of traffic pretty much to all our skills. Some of them had like 300% increase in traffic overnight, just purely because everyone's at home more. So we thought there's something there, and we wanted to investigate it a bit further. So we did these two surveys just to confuse people. We actually published them the other way around. So we did the families first and then the coronavirus one, but it felt like we wanted to get that one out quicker because it's a bit more relevant.
Cool. We were saying just before this call, Rozzi, you mentioned it started raining, and I said, what did I say? Can you remember?
No.
You can't remember? Nobody listens to me.
Come to you.
Yes, exactly. And outside, it is now raining. Literally 10 minutes later, it's raining here now. I knew that would happen. Spooky. So Dustin, we'll get into some of these trends. Have you noticed your behavior towards using voice assistants change over the lockdown period over there in Paris?
Yeah, I think we've talked about this before. My usage of the smart speakers has decreased during the time, actually. Yeah. So I mean, we'll talk about the stats, but I'm definitely in the minority there. But certainly my wife and I are in a shared space, in a smaller shared space. So I actually, bought headphones and stuff, because too much noises, too much speaking out loud, it could wear on each of us pretty quickly. So I'm probably in the minority where mine has actually decreased. What about yours, Kane?
I think it's probably only increased because I'm around it more. So I don't know whether I'm not convinced I'm using it for entirely different things. My phone and my laptop and the stuff I dictating a lot more emails, stuff like that. But maybe I'm using it more because I'm around it more. But yeah, what about you, Rozzi? Is your usage gone up, gone down, stayed the same?
It's gone up. I mean, it's always a funny question to ask, isn't it, when you work in voice tech? Because I feel like it's
the more work you do, the more you use them.
Exactly. I've been using it all the time. It's gone up in terms of a use case that I think we'll come on to quite a lot, which is sort of the entertainment side of things. bought a Chromecast and connected it up to our Google Home. So the world of voice activated Netflix binging has been opened up, and yeah, we've been taking full advantage.
Nice. Classic. So okay then, let's delve into this. Let's delve into the study then. So there's two studies. There's Time to Shine, Alexa getting the UK through isolation, and Alexa being part of the family now. So these are two separate studies, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Conducted at separate times.
Yeah, we did the surveys about a month apart. So they do look at slightly different demographics. The family one is very specifically targeted to people with kids in the household under 18, because that's kind of an area we were interested in. And then the other one is much more general, kind of voice assistant users in the UK. But both of them were kind of equally demographically proportionate to kind of the age split normally of voice assistant users, but very UK focused. So yeah.
Cool. And what is out of the one, because given that we started talking about COVID, there's been a couple of things around COVID and voice assistant usage and things like that, and it's always interesting to find the source and the first party kind of information. So what is it and smart speakers in general have been rising and growing anyway, and we kind of know that, and every year we get reminded of how much they've grown and what the penetration is and all that kind of stuff. But what do you think has, you kind of referenced potential entertainment, what do you think has kind of like changed from the studies and the behavior that we were seeing before lockdown to the usage during lockdown? What are the kind of standout things that you found have changed?
Yeah, well, I mean, think generally speaking, the impact of lockdown and people being in their houses more has had a massive increase in frequency and likelihood to use voice assistants to engage with them. So one of the things that came up was over 50% of people who answered the coronavirus lockdown survey said they're using it more, and 20% of those people said they're using it at least twice as more. So a big boost in general to kind of engagement with the technology, but that in turn is kind of leading to a higher engagement with the voice ecosystem in general. So what we saw from the survey, at least anyway, was this kind of general a bit more kind of experimentation, a bit more discovery, kind of people proactively searching the skills store, trying out new things, discussing it with friends and family. People seem to, with the time they've had on their hands, kind of delve in a little bit more. I think we all know that with a lot of voice assistant users, you know, they might have got one for Christmas and they only use it to listen to the news and then that's it. But people have had a lot more time on their hands. So the investigation into the world has definitely been a lot higher. And then I think also what comes in line with that is a lot more people are discovering the value of their voice assistants and what they can do, which means people are getting more confident about how to use them. They're unlocking all this new functionality. And that's sort of reframing the role of voice assistants, particularly in families, but in general households as well. I think it's no longer the fancy egg timer setter. You know, it's much more. The role is broadening, is becoming a lot more of. Obviously audio streaming, things like that, and we'll come on to that, is always a big one, and that's still absolutely the number one use case. But we're seeing a lot of people kind of relying on their voice assistants a bit more than lockdown. I think the figure was 3 in 5 people agreed that their voice assistant was helping them get through lockdown, which is huge. And a lot of the reasons cited for that was that it was kind of keeping them entertained, stopping them getting bored, helping with workouts, helping with kind of mental health exercises. And that's a big shift, I think, from just that one-way audio consumption, potentially quite functional, news, questions, local information. The scope of their role is definitely broadening.
So the survey is with the survey being a point in time, you also mentioned that you've got some stats from your clients. Are you seeing that continue? Is it a point where there's this 3x increase in skill traffic and that was just a one-time thing? Or as people become more confident, is that growth continuing?
Oh, you mean in like traffic to our skills at the moment?
Right.
Yeah, it's I mean, there was definitely a peak, I think, the first couple of weeks where people were just like, what am I doing? I'm stuck at home, I don't know what's going on. Big peak. But actually especially with certain categories, entertainment, health and fitness. So obviously everyone's been doing their Joe Wicks PE workouts. We have the body coach voice skills. So we, for example, that as a good example, we've seen real continued and sustained usage of those sort of use cases. I think once people discover them, the kind of likelihood to go back to them, we have a bit more time, that retention is slowly improving. So yeah, we are seeing that not just in the survey, but in our actual skills as well.
Interesting. One of the things that I liked and observed, and it's in line with what you were saying, and I've used it. I've cut the infographic, which we'll put the links in the show notes, etc. But the infographic, which has got all the circles on it, and shows the before COVID usage and the after COVID usage. And it kind of like when you can pick out a few of these that I think are relevant to display that increase in confidence. And one is that, so before lockdown, people were using their devices to shop. 23% of people were using their devices to shop. And that was gone up by 10% to 33%. So basically, of the people that you surveyed, a third of them are using their devices to actually shop on them. And I think that if anything is going to show confidence, it's people willing to transact and shop.
Yeah, that was a big one, actually. I was surprised. I mean, in general, in relation to a lot of the categories, the voice commerce one's still one of the lowest, but you're right, that shift from and to clarify, actually, to be fair, with the survey, kind of shopping was also add to basket, not necessarily direct purchase through voice. But I do think you're right, it shows a real shift in difference, and also games and trivia and things like that. We always know that they're quite popular use cases, and there's always a lot of them available, lots of different kind of voice skills on the skill store. But actually that role of people going to voice assistants for entertainment, to beat the boredom, with more time on their hands, I think people are discovering a lot more. So 40% of people said that they're using their voice assistants daily for games and trivia. I mean, that seems huge to me, and that's kind of gone up from 20%. And interestingly, we saw that in kind of kids entertainment and games as well, and also that point around with more homeschooling, parents at home, people are using voice assistants for educational purposes as well. So that's gone up to 64% of people are using voice assistants weekly to kind of basically teach kids and be that kind of educator role. So lots of different things that aren't just, I think, functional use cases are coming out of that.
The thing that was interesting to me on the shopping side, Kane, I think you actually undersell it a little bit, because it's 33% at least daily, but it's also, if you add in the at least weekly, that's 56% overall. So 56 versus, I think it was just over 50% before that. So seeing some growth there, but a lot of growth on the at least daily. One thing though that's interesting is a lot of these categories, you see a shift in how often people who are already using it are using it. So we see a shift from at least weekly to at least daily for shopping. You see it for recipes and cooking a little bit as well. But then there's that stubborn, like 39% for shopping that is actually the same as it was before. Why do the two of you think that is? Is there anything that you're learning in your work, Rozzi, that could help bring those 39% over?
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually. I think with all of the categories, you're right, we did see some people who are just quite stubbornly either not using skills, and therefore like, no, that's kind of not for me, or people who, we did see a shift in general across the categories across the whole thing. And you're right, people who are quite engaged anyway, using it on weekly have now become sort of several times a day usage just because they're around. And we did see people who were kind of dabbling in voice now moving into that, weekly, several times a week category for a lot of things. I think in shopping, there's still, and voice commerce in general, there's still some way to go about not just necessarily confidence, I think, in the shopping process, but actually, more brands offering that. I think Brett and VoiceBot did a good survey last year around, voice commerce. And actually, although there's a lot of functionality available, not many brands are actually putting that in their skills at the moment. So that kind of opportunity to shop perhaps isn't there in the sort of skills that proportion of the audience is actually looking at. But I know that Amazon particularly are doing, and Google are doing a lot to sort of make that path to purchase easier and streamline that process. So I think with shopping, it's definitely watch this space. It's coming, but it's not there yet. What do you think, Kane?
Yeah. So what was your original question, Dustin?
Yeah, I think it was just a question of we are seeing growth in people who are already using it or using it more, which is definitely a good sign. But sort of across the board, the amount of people that are saying never or rarely doesn't seem to change per category. There's some that does a little bit, but largely it's the same number before as it was after. So what does that mean, and what is it? Is that something that we need to tackle as skill builders? Just what are your impressions of that? That's something that stood out, and if it stood out to you.
So your observation is that the people that already use it are using it more, but the people that don't shop or use it for entertainment might not have started to.
Yeah. So if you look at the purple, and we're describing it again, pull up the link that we're sharing.
Yeah, I've got
it. If you look at like wellness, never using it, 38 to 37%. Shopping, 39%. Recipes and cooking, 31%. So people are going from at least monthly to at least weekly, and at least weekly to at least daily, but there's still those people who are never.
Yeah.
What do you think that represents? What do you think that means?
Interesting question. That I didn't actually look at that. I was just concerned with growth. Where's the growth? Yeah, that is interesting. So yeah. Maybe that is harking back to the age-old discoverability issue that we've kind of been speaking about. I think that the other thing is that people are creatures of habits, and I remember. Did you remember the study that Shakib Labidi and Hemel Jill did? I don't know if you've seen that, Rozzi. Essentially, this was back in 2018. They did a study that looked at when people get a smart speaker, what does the usage pattern look like in the months after? And so what they found was that when people get one, the level of experimentation rises. So they're experimenting with it all the time. But then they reach a barrier, essentially, which is, well, I've reached the limits of what it can do. It can't do this at the moment, so I won't try that again. And then the experimentation dips and it plateaus. So they find out what it's capable of, and then they use it for what they know it's capable of until things happen whereby something like someone comes round to the house for dinner. Oh, you've got an Echo. Oh, cool. And then the experimentation rises again. And then they learn something about it. Oh, I didn't know you could play games on it. That's cool. Now we've got a new capability. And so after that, your capability is raised, but you don't experiment again until another point in time. Yeah. And so I wonder whether that model might still be kind of true, in that maybe people are getting into habits, keeping those habits and doubling down on those habits because we're around more rather than experimenting more. Does that make sense?
I think you're right. Although some of the stuff we saw was in the study was that a lot of people, I think 2 out of 3, are finding new things to do on their voice assistant during lockdown. Right. So, and that kind of applies to more general functionality. It also applies to skills. And a lot of people kind of proactively searching, looking for things to do, but also having a discussion with friends and family about what it can do. So exactly your point came there about, talking. I think lockdown has produced that peak again. Certainly, and maybe, as you're right to say, that might be in a certain select group of people who are already quite engaged already. So yeah, I mean, there isn't much shift in that kind of shopping thing, but I do think also, add to basket is kind of a thing that's been around for ages. But I don't think if you're discovering new skills during lockdown, the likelihood is you'll find that many new skills or loads which actually offer a huge amount of voice commerce currently. The kind of market isn't necessarily there. So I think even if you've discovered 1 or 2 new things to do during lockdown, that might not necessarily equate to opportunities for more voice shopping.
Interesting. We've got some questions coming through. And if you're tuning in on LinkedIn, by all means, carry on keeping the questions coming. We'll put them to Rozzi and in a moment. So first question from Michael Novak. Shout out to Michael. Welcome, Michael. Have you asked users about levels of trust, and do they believe that their voice data is processed and kept safe? Anything in there about trust levels and processing of data and things like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. We didn't actually ask anything specific around kind of privacy and data processing. and also to an extent, I mean, we've got a slightly self-selected group of smart speaker users who are using them a lot, but we did ask about confidence, and in the family study we also asked around where people are having voice assistants. I think that's quite an interesting one. So in the family report we asked, as a household, where do you have your smart speakers, specifically about smart speakers, and all the usual stuff came up, living rooms. I think it was 63% of people have them in their living room, 40% people have them in their kitchen. The communal area is fine, but what really stood out to me is actually 20% of families are putting smart speakers in their kids' bedrooms and the parents' bedrooms. And I think that to me says a lot around, okay, maybe the sort of data privacy thing is becoming less front of mind for a lot of users. The other thing as well is, although we didn't ask about privacy and protection, we did ask around value exchange and kind of how useful people are considering their voice assistants. And especially since lockdown, we saw 40% of people basically saying, because I've been using it more, I understand and appreciate that my voice assistant is more useful. And I think a lot of the questions around data and concerns about privacy, it becomes as well a value exchange conversation. If you're getting a huge amount of value, potentially, the worry about the data you're giving away, not that it's not relevant, but it's maybe less front of mind. So they were kind of the two things we saw around that. And then in terms of confidence of using it, that was the other thing we asked about, which is a lot of people are more confident. But certainly data protection specifically, we didn't ask about. It's a good question though. I'll add it to the next survey we do.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, we've got one in the kids' bedroom, but I think you hit the nail on the head with the value exchange, because that's always been the thing that people respond to about mobile, isn't it? The question is, well, what about my data? And the answer is, well, have you got a phone? And it's like, well, your phone's gathering a hell of a lot more data than your smart speaker is. But then it's always about, well, the answer to that is, well, I don't really care, because my phone gives me so much value that I'm not really that bothered if you know where I am and you know who I'm with and you know what I'm searching for, because I get value out of it. And I think that maybe what you're describing there might be that smart speakers in particular might be beginning to prove the value that they offer, and therefore users might be a little bit more comfortable and confident.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it remains to be said, and we will definitely ask a question next time. But I think, I mean, I used to work in kind of direct marketing. It was all value exchange. If you're going to ask customers for data, you have to give them something back. And I think more and more voice assistants are offering that.
There's another question here from Stefan Massey, which is an interesting one. You mentioned shopping and games, but what about watching TV on the Alexa show and a media device use cases? You were talking a little bit about the Chromecast earlier. Was there any indication or insights around there?
Yeah, actually, really good question. Smart home was one of the use cases that came out with one of the biggest kind of jumps of frequency. So I think, as with the shopping one, if you haven't got your Philips light bulbs, you're always going to be in a rarely category. But it saw a huge usage, and I think, Kane, you'll have to remind me because you've got the figures in front of you, but I think it's sort of over 50% of people are now using their voice assistants for the smart home uses daily. So in terms of kind of controlling the home with voice assistants, especially with people in the homes and lockdown more, the frequency of use is much higher. But we also, when we did the surveys, we asked people how they're engaging with voice and on what platforms. And I was quite surprised actually by the extent to which sort of smart TV came out as a really high way of people interacting. So of those who had Alexa, well, of those people who had smart TVs, people were using Alexa 37% of the time via their smart TV. So, and that's a lot actually. Obviously, Amazon are doing a lot to push Fire TV, but I think these figures suggest that is slowly beginning to kind of pay off. And then again, with things like the Chromecast, we saw 20% of people using Google on their smart TV as well. So it's growing. And I think today even we saw a bit of a leak, didn't we, for Google's new TV streaming kind of dongles. I imagine that will be voice controlled and that'll drive more usership as well. Yeah, much bigger use case. In terms of sort of where people are using voice, obviously right now the house is always going to dominate. But I think that when we looked at the split, we asked about smart TVs, home, and then kind of cars and on the go, which is obviously that sort of Alexa everywhere strategy that we're all talking about quite a lot. And certainly voice assistant TV and smart home came out as the next kind of most popular after home. Cars and on the go still remain a much smaller proportion.
More of a future kind of potential, that, isn't it, then, I suppose?
Yeah.
The smart home makes sense though, doesn't it? Because everyone's at home, everyone's spending more time at home, and you know, the last couple of days we've been using the heating a bit more because its temperature's just dropped.
That's terrible. It's June.
I know. Well, I think we've had summer. We had summer at the end of May, I think. So as we mentioned, if you're tuning in on LinkedIn, I keep going like this when I say LinkedIn because my tablet's down here that I'm watching it on, but for people who are actually watching it, it makes no sense. But if you are tuning in on LinkedIn, if you've got any other questions about the study, any other questions for Rozzi, stick them in the comments, and we'll do our very best to get around to them. The second, any other insights on that first study before we move on to the second one, Rozzi, that you think we haven't covered and that you want to kind of highlight? Lockdown behavior.
Yeah, lockdown behavior. I think that's kind of covered it really. I mean, interesting. Both of the surveys kind of highlighted across the two quite similar things in terms of the broadening role of voice assistants in the home. So, that kind of entertainment, news and audio streaming, things like that. Interestingly, although family engagement and the way that families specifically use with voice gave us some other interesting insights because we asked different things, that kind of broad shift in categories and the importance of things like, entertainment and maybe kind of potentially softer use cases, they're really high across both. So yeah, they're interesting reports to look side by side, actually. Things like, we found in the coronavirus report that people say they'll probably predict they'll use their voice assistant 40% more in the future, for example. When we asked the same question of families a month earlier, they said 30%. So, similar kind of areas are being considered the same. And I think that the impact of lockdown has only just slightly exacerbated those trends we were already beginning to see.
Interesting. In the second study, you delve into a lot more about like family usage and do they use it together, do families use it with the kids and things like that, how confident are you and things, but you also asked quite a lot of questions around like what's important from the perspective of actually building and launching voice applications. So there's things in here around, what's more important? Is it like a brand that we recognize and trust? Do we care about ratings and reviews? Do we, so let's just kind of, I mean, all of this stuff is important actually, judging by the responses. And I'll go through them and then we can kind of get into how you kind of interpret it. So you asked the question, what is important to families using voice apps? So presumably this is third party stuff, not, okay.
Exactly. Yeah, we asked a whole load of kind of general voice assistant ones, but then we really wanted to drill down into that kind of third party behavior. Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And before we actually get into that, then on the third party stuff, was there and I can't recall off the top of my head, but was there a kind of number in terms of the percentage or number of people who use third party stuff versus first party stuff in there, or were you kind of assuming that they kind of do?
That's a good question. I don't think we included it in the report, but it was a huge amount of users. One of the things we asked very early on, we should actually put that in there, Ken, that's a very good point.
Thank you.
It was, it was about 85% of the people who we said, do you use Amazon Alexa and Google Assistant? Yes. Mm-hmm. Do you use Skills? Yes. Okay. So really, really high proportion. I mean, obviously a lot of that is going to be those less interactive formats, those audio out, kind of BBC News, Spotify, things like that. But broadly speaking, it was a big proportion actually.
Okay.
One other question. Just real quick. One of the questions that a lot of people have is whether users even know that they're using Skills. So it seems like in your research that people actually know what a skill is and they know if they're using it.
Yeah, I mean, we were very clear, and it's hard when you write those survey questions because you have to be like, we're talking about third parties. Here are some examples. Do you get it? So we worked really hard actually on that kind of that research stimulus to make sure we were getting people say the right thing. And you're right, maybe that extra 15% actually did use Spotify, just didn't realize. But actually, more generally, we've been doing some research for a client at the moment, and we were asking around language to do with account linking. And we said, have you heard of account linking? Do you know what it is? And the results were massive. I mean, 70-80% of people, yeah, I know account linking, I know how it works, I get that. And we weren't expecting that, because I think we thought exactly as you thought, Dustin, that it was going to be, people don't quite get that. It seems to be changing a bit. So that's positive, I think.
We've got a question from Gavin Fletcher, which I'm going to come on to in one moment, Gavin. Thank you for tuning in, and have a campuchuchu on me next time I see you. But first, the question was, what is important to families using voice apps? It was the question in the survey. And there's 6 things that are all high in terms of what people think is important. So 95% of people thought that it is important for the application to be from a brand that we recognize and trust. 94% of people base their the importance on ratings and reviews, which that's interesting, because I wouldn't have thought it'd be as high as that, but we'll discuss that. 94% of people also think that it's important for it to be easy to understand what it actually does. 86% of people is that they think it's important for it to be top of the list in the skill store. It's the old kind of like Amazon help situation, which is what everyone's after. 77% is recommended by our voice assistant, Amazon recommendations, and 74% think that a clear and impactful logo is important. So the 2 things, we'll get both of your thoughts on it, but the 2 things that I thought stood out was miles more people than I thought think that ratings and reviews is important, and nearly 3/4 of people think that the logo itself is important.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Dustin, do you want to go first?
What do you think, Dustin?
No, I'm interested in hearing your thoughts, Rozzi.
Oh, I mean, I was surprised by that, to be honest. I thought a logo seems very, I mean, we know from, mobile apps and things like that, logos and branding in general is important and can do a lot to kind of communicate things like that. I think I was surprised by that. I thought things like skill descriptions and ratings would be, really important, and they are. So I suppose in the order of things, it makes sense that, the logo isn't quite as up there. I think reviews, to be honest, based on our experience of building branded apps, reviews are such a big thing, we say a lot of the time, because it does have a huge impact. Not only because it unlocks, it impacts the search algorithm when it comes to the skill store, and we know that more and more people are searching the skill store, and good reviews and good ratings encouraging you to be kind of above the fold and be on featured lists and all of that sort of stuff. Also on a kind of agency basis as well, more reviews, more usership helps kind of unlock more support when it comes to the Alexa Skills marketing team. Things like that, you have to have kind of proven a certain amount before that point. But also, we know that reviews are always a powerful motivating factor for people looking to try stuff. And although because of lockdown, people are potentially in a bit more of an experimental headspace when it comes to skills, having voice ratings turned on and being able to see that 16,000 people have used this skill already and rated it 5 stars. I mean, that's huge.
Do you think that, so 95% of people said it's important for the application to be from a brand that they recognize and trust? Does that mean then that it is easier from the discoverability and finding out what skills are available is always the thing that people kind of come back to? So does that mean that it's easier to make an impact if you are already a well-known brand, and harder therefore? Does that amplify how hard it is for a new company trying to launch applications in these platforms? It makes it harder for them.
I think certainly, yeah. In terms of that kind of mental shortcut, knowing the name of the brand, knowing that, and all of that kind of brand credibility that comes with a name of a brand is always going to help you. So, when we ask users about what brands would you be more likely to engage with, there was a whole range across a load of sectors, and actually generally speaking people were pretty kind of optimistic and willing to engage with a lot, but ultimately big name brands came out higher because they are the ones people know. They know what the kind of use case offering is, they know what added value they will add to their lives. So, and we've certainly seen that, we've built kind of voice skills which are kind of quizzes and games before, and the traffic has been pretty good. We launched BBC Match of the Day magazine, which is a similar use case, and everyone's heard of it, and the traffic is sky high. So I think it is a useful shortcut, and it's a good opportunity if you've already done the work and established a brand name, to kind of leverage that in voice, so that when people are using your brand name, you have an answer for it. I think certainly when it comes to smaller brands, we've seen the importance, even with big brands, of promotion and marketing at that scale. I think it does become more important if you're a slightly less well-known brand. We did quite a lot of work recently actually with WaterAid, a global water charity, and we've just launched a skill for them actually, which is sort of battling to help people battle anxiety, and it's sort of lots of lovely water sounds and mindfulness from around the communities around the world that WaterAid works in. And we had a bit of a strategic decision to make there around, do you call it WaterAid, which actually, although some people heard of, although it's a massive global charity, they've got a real awareness challenge, or do you call it something a bit more generic, which people are just looking for, to your point, Kay, about the skill description and what it does. Do you call it something very clear? This is the use case. And then, so we actually went with that solution in the end. We went for when a brand is a big brand, but not necessarily known, we actually recommended they called it something more generic. So it's called The Sound of Water by WaterAid. And that kind of does both. So you're capturing both. But I think if you're a really big brand name, go with the power of the brand, because clearly it has a big impact.
Yeah, I'm a bit curious about that. So I was looking through, and you've got some like Diageo, which is just the bar, and then you got Unilever, which there's a few in there, but I don't believe any of those are actually using the brand name. Is that perhaps because Unilever itself isn't much of a brand? Like, how do you balance when to use, when to go generic, when to go?
It's a good point. I think when it's really, really clear and the power of the brand is recognizable already, it's a great one to leverage. With Unilever, actually, the skills we've built for them, they are actually sort of master brand level. So we've done one for Unilever, which is called All Things Hair, and that is that's an umbrella brand they have. So that made sense because it sort of works in a category level and also a specific brand. Same with Recipedia, actually, it's a sort of sub brand for Knorr. But they do a good job, both of those, actually, about communicating what the use case is at the same time as being the brand name. But you're right. I mean, that sort of generic term squatting almost, that was what Diageo deliberately wanted to do that with the bar and kind of own a category level. I think very early on, everyone was talking about that, weren't they? Kind of get out there and create get a keyword which is generic enough that you can own the whole category, and that certainly does work. But I think if you've got a really strong brand, don't waste it.
Open the bar sounds pretty cool as well, doesn't
it?
Open the bar.
Yeah.
It's cool. I'll read that question from Gavin, and then we'll kind of discuss some of the impact. We've kind of started to get into a little bit of that in terms of some of the impact on brands entering the space and stuff like that. But Gavin's asked, did you ask anything about like productivity in terms of the digital assistants helping people be more productive? So obviously people are working from home now a lot. So the home is now the office. Was there anything in there about how the assistants may have been helping them in a work environment, or was it largely around the family context?
Oh, in the family one or the
in any of them? Yeah. Did it come up in terms of, are these assistants helping people at work as well while they're at home? If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Actually, we didn't ask about work productivity specifically. We asked about organisation. So I think arguably, part of that could fall in there. With the family report, we asked how do you kind of see your voice assistants? And one of the big things that came out of that, which we can maybe talk about later, is that over 50% of people saw their voice assistants as another member of the family, which I was like, oh, a bit creepy, wow. But okay. But then underneath that as well, I think 7 in 10 people said, they're important to kind of keep the family organized and everyone on track and, that process. So there was certainly something in the family report around that kind of more functional organizational side of things. We didn't ask about work specifically in the lockdown, but maybe if we do a follow-up, I'm going to add that in. Data privacy, work productivity.
Nice. There we go. Crowdsourcing questions.
Yeah, this is great. Everyone, just write those down.
So What are some of the we've started to get into a little bit what the impact is on brands and companies wanting to enter this space. So one is that it's going to help you if you have a recognizable brand already, or if you can find a use or an invocation phrase that kind of naturally fits with what the user's trying to do. So open the bar, perfect example. Open or play the sound of water, perfect example. Fits in with a natural kind of way that people might genuinely ask for it anyway.
Yeah.
So in that instance, people are likely to just find out stuff by just asking, and that's like the dream, isn't it? The kind of implicit invocation side of things. You just ask for it, and it sorts it out for you and puts you into the right place.
Yeah.
For those that don't quite have that, for those that didn't manage to get the bar, and those that haven't quite got a really really recognizable brand, but still might have some recognition and have a decent amount of brand presence, but maybe it's not, like WaterAid, for example. A lot of people might have heard of them and they've got a bit of brand equity, but they might not be like a huge global brand. So there were some things in here around what prompts families to try voice apps, and within there is potential advice for brands approaching launching voice applications in terms of how they might be able to get people to use it. So the four kind of categories were 31% saw it on promotional material, 18% saw it printed on a product, which I think is pretty high. 23% just stumbled across it while speaking to it, maybe the implicit invocations, and 30% found it in the actual skill store. So out of all of that, most people are seeing the advertisements or gathering understanding about the capability being there through promotional material.
Yeah. And I think,
does that tally with what you've done as well with Voxly and things like that?
Well, certainly. I mean, more and more, whenever we kick off a project, we will always start talking about the product and the use case and what we want to build. And at exactly the same time, we say you need to start thinking about marketing now, because it shouldn't ever be an afterthought. Even though, things like, clever things like hoping that people will find it, via kind of implicit invocation and recommendations, that's great. But ultimately, especially with those examples came around brands that aren't necessarily that well known, you have to market it. You have to kind of start thinking about that really early on. Although I was quite kind of buoyed by the fact that, essentially 50% of families said, yeah, we've used a skill because we've seen it on a physical or digital kind of advertising. That's good. I think that says that more and more brands are beginning to do that, and to sort of build messaging about their apps into part of their sort of always on brands comms. I think there's more to be done on that, because to be honest, I think although 30% of people are finding it on the skill store compared to 50% of people finding it by marketing, that to me says, I know they're both important, but I think brands can be doing more to market. And I think what's good is that more and more people are used to call to actions around smart speakers now. They're becoming a bit more common. If you listen to any kind of BBC Sounds podcast, their call to action is listen on the app or on a smart speaker. That's becoming a lot more kind of common language around, this is, and I think there's that IAB report out recently that 30% of UK audio listening is now happening through smart speakers, which is massive. So I think there's more to be done in terms of marketing and trying to develop that into an always on comm strategy and make sure that that's an important part of the brand touch point at all times. I haven't seen as much marketing when it comes to like audio and radio, and I think that's quite an interesting area that often when we'll launch a skill, there'll be some great social activity, some brilliant kind of, Match of the Day did lots of kind of double page spreads in their magazine, lots of landing pages, digital stuff. But actually, we know that audio is one of the key ways of consuming and working with your smart speaker. So I'm looking forward to seeing more brands playing in that space. Actually, is going, we built a voice app. How can we use audio to actually drive traffic to it?
A lot of people might even be listening to the audio on the smart speaker at the time, basically. So you've almost got a chance in some areas of like stealing customers or stealing traffic directly there and then from the thing that they're listening to.
Yeah, exactly. And you can do really clever targeting and make sure you're only kind of telling Alexa users about a skill, so it's much more relevant. I think there's a really interesting kind of media conversation and development to be happening soon around that. And I think it's still seen as quite a traditional channel. So connecting the two is a gap to be bridged, but I think it's getting there.
Interesting that. I think the Pandora have got that level of targeting, haven't they, where they can specifically target people who are listening on a smart speaker right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So most popular voice app categories, we've spoke a lot about entertainment, spoke a lot about kind of games being like areas that have had a lot of growth, but seemingly, and I don't know how, maybe you can tell us how this question was phrased, but from what we can look at, it's the most popular categories are services at 35%, food and drink then at 28%, which is shopping, which we've got that tallies with the other stat of people's increase in shopping behavior, and then media and entertainment, then children's brands, and then retail. And there's a few more: travel, health and beauty, and charity at 13%, which is interesting. But
Yeah.
and this has always been where the conversations around voice assistance and things like that is where we've always said on VUX World where the value is. Yes, there's value in entertainment. There's always been value in entertainment. Comedians would never have been able to make a living if that wasn't the case. And you know, all the TV networks and the Netflixes and all that kind of stuff, that's well and truly a valid use case. But the services element is where we've always found that that's kind of where the real other opportunities are, you know, like, you know, actually shopping and transacting and getting stuff done. And it's interesting actually to see that the most popular category, according to the people filling in the survey, is services. And so for those listening who are thinking about kind of, you know, exploring these channels, it doesn't necessarily always have to be entertainment led.
Oh no, absolutely not. Yeah, no, completely. You're right. Especially with families, actually. I mean, entertainment was a massive use case, but actually when we did just ask what brands, we had a really long list. You know, what brands would you be more likely to engage with via voice? You're right. Kind of when people are thinking very kind of rationally and logically, what would be useful, services came out higher. So actually one of those was like NHS and health services. So, you know, and those pinch points where we all have, you know, or telecom services, or the bank, you know, you have to sit on the phone for ages. You know, how great would it be if we could actually use our voice assistants to almost kind of triage and be on hold for us until that, you know, booking appointments, not having to wait. So I think you're right. I mean, services in general, that's always, I think that's often the motivating factor as well for people, isn't it? To kind of use or toe dip into voice is, I want to listen to Spotify and the news, and it would be useful to help me kind of keep stuff organized. We think of functional use cases first. And I think that entertainment thing almost comes later when you're in the world already and you're discovering what's going on and you go, oh, there's all this, you know, interesting features, or you see an advert or something. But yeah, certainly functional services came out on top in terms of what people want to think about. So, you know, appointment settings, you know, I mean, a lot of brands are kind of doing basic sort of FAQs, using them as almost sort of customer service level, stage one, before passing over to customer service people, things like that. There are definitely lots of use cases there that smaller brands can use voice for.
And there's the line also between, in some areas, the line between product and services is decreasing and getting more and more faint anyway. Like, is Netflix a product? Is it a service? Is the films the product? Is that part of the service? Like, is Spotify a product, or is that a service? Like, I think that the whole kind of internet has just kind of really made that area between product and service a real kind of grey area. So it's not, I think there's definitely opportunities. So some of the brands that I think people want, so this is people wanting to engage, and this will lead on to the following question. People who want to engage with these brands on voice, so presumably they might not be now. Cadbury's, interestingly, McDonald's, Netflix, you mentioned the NHS, Tesco, TripAdvisor is interesting, Boots, Uber Eats, I think they might have a skill, but I think it's probably just delivery check-in. Deliveroo, Coca-Cola, Walkers, CBBC, which has already got a pretty active presence, and Lego, which are already doing some stuff. So given that, there's a mixture of brands there. There's retail, there's government, there's healthcare, there's digital service-based stuff, there's entertainment, there's hospitality, travel, entertainment. Is there, based on the insights that have come out of this and the demand that people are asking for service-based stuff, or for these brands in particular, are there any specific type of companies that are either should be doing something right now that aren't already, or companies that maybe have dipped the toe in that should be doubling down? Any kind of observations on that? Any type of companies that haven't quite explored it that might find opportunities based on this, or any that have tried something and should really start doubling down on it?
Yeah, I think, I mean, what's interesting is you read the list out, is that really ties up with that kind of the importance of the power of the big brand, right? Most people, you know, arguably the ones that came up really high were the brands that people go, yeah, I know them, I recognize them, they're relevant to my life, and therefore I will engage with them via voice. So I suppose sort of a weird point one is, you know, if you're a big brand and you have a big presence across the UK, I think what a lot of these surveys are showing is that, you know, your audience is there, it's willing to engage, so worth sort of acting now and thinking about. There's going to be tons of use cases for big brands like this.
What about those? Sorry, what about those that might say, how does it kind of apply to me? Like, you know, how kind of social media kind of came about, and it was like everyone felt like they need to have a Facebook page, and then the question was like, well, who wants to talk to the toothpaste? Like, do you think that there is scope and opportunity for every type of big brand?
Well, it's a good question. Yes, I do think there is. I think we've got voice skills have been around long enough now that we have great examples across the whole customer journey of where voice can work. It doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, the obvious kind of upfront awareness or content marketing. It could be customer service, you know, it could be looking to you know, reduce overheads in customer service and try to triage that. It could be much more awareness and inspiration, you know, kind of doing the part that sort of blogs and social media would also do to help out. But I think also a lot of brands, where voice can really come in, is delivering some sort of brand experience in a much more personalized way. So if I take, for example, we talked about the Unilever All Things Hair earlier, there's loads of brilliant content on their All Things Hair website around hair, but the voice experience tailors its inspiration and advice to your type of hair, your length of hair, you know, what you're worried about. So I think so many big brands have got content there. It's just about if you can use voice to deliver more of a personalized experience. And we know that's always, you know, particularly now, that's such a big motivating factor for a lot of brands. Even if you maybe can't see an immediate use case, you know, do the workshop, do the work, pick an audience, maybe even go specific. And if you spend some time really thinking about that, I do think there's opportunities in voice for most big brands. Yeah.
Interesting. That's a really nice way of summarizing it. I think that if I was to summarize what we've just spoke about, I think I would say that given the research and the conversation we've just had, it feels to me as though the adoption's been rising anyway. That's been rising for the last 3 years, 4 years in America. The usage has been alongside it, but for a while it's kind of been skills were like 30% of users were using them, and music was by far and away the most important thing. Seems as though what the kind of lockdown has done is it's encouraged those that use it anyway to use it more, and to maybe even explore areas where they might not have explored before, like shopping, or maybe they're reading with the kid, or maybe they're using it to help them keep on top of the to-do list or whatever. And so confidence is then growing. And then there's an appetite now for users to engage with brands which might not have necessarily been there before. Maybe they might have done an interactive story with Colgate because it's cool and fun and novel. Yeah. Whereas it seems as though now there may be an appetite because they've built enough trust, they're invested enough in it, it's part of the daily life now, it's proven its value, and so privacy maybe starts to rescind slightly, privacy concerns. And then what you kind of wrapped up with there is that really there isn't an obvious brand that couldn't find an opportunity here, and that actually for 9 out of 10, 99 out of 100, there probably is opportunities, even if it's not an end-to-end customer journey. Maybe there's opportunities to add value within the customer journey. And so it seems as though lockdown has had a kind of a fairly decent, I'm not, I want to say a decent impact. That sounds really terrible because it obviously hasn't, and it's been really bad for lots and lots of people. But in terms of specifically smart speakers and Alexa and Google Assistant, I know voice is bigger than that, but most of this study has been about Alexa. Yeah. So from Alexa's point of view, it's actually been a fairly decent time, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. It's a weird phrasing, but a silver lining, I suppose, for this industry has been the time that we've all had at home. I mean, a lot of people, especially with the coronavirus study, they said like 40% of people said they'd use it more after they came out of lockdown. And obviously you've always got to take those sort of findings with a pinch of salt, but I think that speaks volumes in terms of the time that this has provided for people to kind of dive into the ecosystem a bit more and understand why it's useful, and also potentially recognize how far the technology has come, perhaps since they started. I mean, you said earlier, Kane, people get into habits, don't they? They pick their 3 skills and then that's all they have. And this has given, I think, people the opportunity to discover a few more things, talk with friends and family about what it can do. And, you know, with more users on the platform, more engaged users as well, education's gone up around skills, you know, all of these things I think are proving and pointing to a really kind of optimistic future in terms of voice assistant usage, and also for brands specifically looking for skills themselves.
Cool. Dustin, any final thoughts? Anything?
No, I think this is great. I know there's a couple of questions on LinkedIn that we haven't been able to address, but perhaps if people wanted to reach out, ask you those questions, or just learn more about what you're doing, where can they go?
Yeah, well, first of all, just send me a message on LinkedIn if you want to. Otherwise, we're just at voxlydigital.com, or you can email freshThinking@voxlydigital. That's Ravi and my email address. So we'll get back to you whatever way we can. Or have a read of the reports themselves, because they are actually available on our website, on the blog.
Do that. We'll put the link in the show notes. What I'll do is I'll tag you, Rozzi, on the post for the live broadcast on LinkedIn. So if anyone does want to ask any follow-up questions, we put it in the comments, and maybe we can get around to it there, or get in touch with Rozzi. We'll put the links in the show notes on the website and in the comments here for the studies if people want to go and check them out, which I would recommend you do, especially if you work in the industry. We're always looking for, you know, fresh stats and data and insights that you can use to kind of extract insight from, essentially. And these 2 reports, honestly, yeah, I've used them I've done probably, I think, 3 webinars over the last couple of weeks that I've used them in, and with client meetings and things like that. It's been really, really handy. So yeah.
Well, hopefully there'll be many more to come. We're going to try and keep doing them.
Cool. Please do. And those of you that are in the industry, do check out Project Voice Catalyst. Might be something for you, Rozzi, to maybe check out. So Bradley Metrock and his team at Project Voice, they're running Project Catalyst. So it's for brands that are looking to meet companies that require AI, conversational AI services, or vice versa. And if you're looking for talent, if you're looking for services, anything like that, then yeah, check out Project Voice. Email ray@scorepublishing.us. I'll put the links in the show notes as we go. Gavin said, "Thanks, my thought fridge is full." It's a bit of an in joke we have going. Has anyone been following Bob Mortimer on Instagram?
No.
He's hilarious. He does these impressions of people, you know, the people on the trains that just talk really loudly on the phone.
Oh yeah.
And annoying. He does impressions of them, and he one of the lines is, "I'll put that in the thought fridge and snack on it later." So Gavin's thought fridge is full. So yeah, nice one. Well, thank you all for tuning in, and thanks for the questions. Apologies we didn't get around to all of them, but hopefully we can do in the comments afterwards. Thank you, Rozzi, for joining us. This has been absolutely immense, absolutely great insights, fantastic studies, and you know, love everything that you're doing at Voxly. So thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun, guys.
Cool. Well, until next time, I think it's going to be the rundown on Thursday, next Thursday, similar kind of time as now. And on Friday, we're speaking to Frank Schneider, the Fresh Prince of AI from Philly, who is making a return to the podcast to give us an update on what Speakeasy AI have been working on in contact centers using conversational IVRs to help organizations save costs and be more productive. So until next week, thanks for tuning in.